Miraculous Season 6 seems to be a season of extreme plot development. After 5 seasons where it felt like things hardly ever changed, since the second saga began, we've seen new characters be introduced, existing characters be fleshed out in far more detail than we'd ever seen before, we've seen ships set sail, family bonds be strengthened, we've fleshed out the 2 main leads and set up multiple future villain characters, and of course all of this development has led to a reinvigoration of theorising and plot discussion in the fandom. And this is great because it felt like for a long time after Season 5, all that was available was complaints about the story direction and the character arcs/relationships. I will admit that I certainly contributed to that, but really, that's what happens when a fandom gets content starved. It goes nuts. But like I said, now things are different. We're actually able to talk about fresh topics. And one of those topics that I've seen cropping up more recently is the idea that there's going to be a hero team traitor at some point going forward. Maybe it won't be this season, maybe it won't be next season, but at some point they think it's going to happen and it'll shake the foundations of the team. There have been a number of names tossed out as these candidates, with the foremost among them being Felix, and so that's what I want to discuss today. I want to go through the different names that it could be and decide which of them, if any, makes sense as a candidate. I'll start off by saying that I'm not actually sure that this is in any way a necessary plot point to include in the show. The reality is that we're already teasing that one of the new characters is going to turn out to be Lila or Lila adjacent. Plus there's the whole thing with Natalie and the Illuminati that's almost certainly going to lead to somebody being betrayed at some point in the future. We just don't quite know who is going to get betrayed yet, that's all. From a certain point of view, you could also argue that Marinette's arc this season is her slow burn betrayal of Adrian's trust by continually hiding things from him and keeping him in the dark about the truth of his father's actions. And then there's the whole Chloe becomes Miracle Queen storyline back in Season 3. Hell, Felix also does some tasty betrayal back in the Season 4 finale when he poses as Adrian and gets close to Ladybug, then uses the dog Miraculous to allow Gabe to steal everything that was in the Miracle Box. Ultimately, I think the idea of betrayal is well and truly going to be overplayed if you then also include a hero team betrayal to work with Lila or whoever. Sometimes you just need to let an idea rest, otherwise it becomes ridiculous over time and loses its impact. Regardless though, we do need some names. Hell, let's just work our way through the Miraculous team. We'll start with Felix because that's the name I keep seeing crop up. I just don't think so. They've already done it once with him helping Gabe. However, we know that the only reason he even did that in the first place was to secure his own future by getting his hands on the Peacock. Pretty sure it was just a desperation move. It's not like he's a treacherous person by nature. I see no angle or reason as to why they'd backtrack on his arc to make him seem like a person who'd be a villain for the sake of being a villain. What could somebody like Lila possibly offer him that he couldn't get on his own? He is pretty rich. I don't view him as some sociopath. He loves Adrian. He loves Kagami. He went out of his way to try to keep Marinette safe when he was deleting the world because Adrian loves her. The dude's also a massive mama's boy. He hated Gabe, but he did what he had to do from his point of view, and so that's that. It doesn't mean that he's going to throw his lot in with Lila, and it just wouldn't be good writing to do so. It would be a bit of a bastardization of the character. The only way you could make it make sense is if he legitimately has no other choice, i.e., somebody he cares about is in real peril that can't be stopped without him doing what the villain says. I get that he can be roguish and selfish, but I think his villain arc is over with. Okay, so now that our prime suspect's out of the way, we can work our way through the rest of the team. Let's start with Marinette just for fun. Yeah, so there's absolutely zero chance that Marinette's going to betray the heroes considering it's her team. Obviously, as we discussed earlier, there is the whole question of her personal betrayal of Adrian by hiding the truth about Gabe from him, but beyond that, there's not much to say. The only way it would be possible is if you had an evil Marinette that came from a parallel universe. But even then it wouldn't work anymore because we've already had a character like that turn up and make peace with Prime Ladybug. To do it again would be massive overkill. So we can cross Ladybug off the list. What about Adrian/Cat Noir? Well, it's certainly a more likely prospect than Marinette, but it still doesn't make it realistic. The dude's loyal, and I just can't see him ever side with the bad guy under any circumstances beyond being akumatized, which would therefore preclude him from being considered a betrayal anyway. There's no chance he would ever willingly join up with Lila, and it's almost certain he wouldn't help the Illuminati either. He's loyal, with strong morals, it just wouldn't fit the character. I think the only way you could spin it is by having it be a soft betrayal, where it's not really a betrayal, more that it's him cutting off the team after discovering the truth that Ladybug's been hiding, where he just doesn't help the heroes until he resolves those differences. But even that's hard to envisage. I reckon it's far more likely he'd still turn up and just spend a lot of time snarky at Ladybug, like he did when he felt like she stood him up during Glaciator. I feel that it's the same idea for Rena Rouge. Would she actively join somebody that's going up against Marinette/Ladybug? No chance. They're besties. But based on her behaviour during Revelator, when she briefly learned the truth about Gabriel Agreste, and that Marinette had been lying to almost everybody, she did react badly. That could cause some sort of rift if it came out again, although I feel like the ending of that episode is meant to show that the next time she finds out, she's not going to be angry, because she and Marinette talked about how there's something that Marinette knows, but isn't ready to share yet. I feel like based on all of that, we can rather easily scratch her name off the list too. This brings us to Nino, to Carapace. Poor Nino. Poor, sweet, blabbermouthy Nino. I actually think there's a good chance that if there is a traitor, it's him. Not in the traditional sense though. I don't think he'd do anything malicious and go out of his way to spill his secrets to Lila or anybody else really. However, we do know that sometimes he speaks before he thinks, he has minimal filter, and a tendency to blab about things. This is a prime way to have a villain learn something important that can be damaging to the team, whilst also ensuring that you don't character assassinate Nino along the way, because an overt betrayal just isn't in the cards and it wouldn't work. Now we come to Viperion. The reality is that this dude is betrayal proof. Dude got jerked around and dumped, and he came back ready to be his ex-girlfriend's emotional support and try to get her with a new guy, whilst also acting as emotional support for said new guy. Any sort of betrayal arc would 100% destroy his character completely for no real gain. The story doesn't become better by removing such a wholesome presence. Not everything needs to be grimdark and edgy. Superheroes are supposed to be about hope. This dude is the epitome of that in this franchise. Plus, any Luca betrayal is essentially an instant game over because he knows both the secret identities. We've already seen in Miraculous London that unlike Gabe, if Lila learns a secret identity, she will easily sweep the board with no mistakes. And another point in its disfavor is the fact that I don't think Luca's even met Lila on screen, so it'd be even more stupid. They don't have any sort of connection. Nah. Next up, Pegasus. Yeah, I don't think that Max is a big enough character for this type of storyline to have any sort of impact on him. We hardly know him beyond knowing he likes video games and he's proud of his mum. Also, he's extremely smart. That's about it. If he had a betrayal arc, you'd just be sitting there questioning why they decided to go in this story direction. You want things to make sense for the characters, that's true, but a good story also needs to prioritize wow factor and hype. There's no hype to be had with secret villain Max. Plus, if he brought along Markov into the party, well, it's once again clean sweep, game over. Markov's too smart. Ryuko's next, and once again, I just can't see it. A big part of Kagami's arc so far has been about making friends and slowly pushing back on her mother's dominance of her entire life. Maybe it could have worked earlier in the show's run, but this current version of Kagami, no way. It would be absolute character assassination. Plus, just from a meta point of view, I doubt they'd play out this type of storyline with her, and then also have her feature heavily as one of the key heroes for the Tokyo Stellar Force special. I think there's no doubt going to be attempts to control her by her mum, but I feel much like she did when Gabe was the lead villain, she's going to try to hold firm. Also, it's not like Lila's going to be able to come out of the woodwork to try to get sympathy from her. It's now common knowledge how much Lila sucks. King Monkey's certainly a maybe. Kim, as recently as Season 5, has been a massive prick. If Chloe was the main villain of the show, I could 100% see this guy letting the big simp energy cloud his mind and help her out. But helping Lila from the shadows, nah. And the Illuminati storyline does not fit him at all. I could see him falling victim to Nino syndrome and accidentally letting something slip that he's not supposed to, but that's about it. Also, much like with Max, I don't think the audience cares enough about his character for it to have the effect that you'd want. After all, when there's a surprise betrayal in a show, you want the audience to feel that shock and feel that grief, much like the characters who are experiencing do. Thus, it needs to be an important character, not a fringe bully. Nobody cares about Kim. Nobody cares. Vesperia's next, and this is one I can actually see, as they seem to be introducing this arc into the narrative where somebody's threatened to expose her for who she used to be, likely a bully. If somebody holds this over her head, it might be possible she'd do what they say to avoid the consequences of that knowledge coming out. From a meta perspective though, I think it would be rather lazy and derivative to have the Be Miraculous user do the wrong thing twice in a row. Plus, it would really play into the narrative that Zoe is simply Chloe, having taken everything from the OG character in terms of family connections, friends, acquaintances, home, and Miraculous team slot. I mean, could you imagine the meltdown if Zoe betrayed the team and then got the inevitable redemption arc? Chloe stands around the world would converge on Miraculous Corp HQ. I feel like you could construct an interesting story where Polymouse or Pigala have their empathy and kindness taken advantage of, but once again you come to that place with Max or Kim or most of the minor characters of who cares? It doesn't have the same punchy impact. Neither would Purple Tigress, who barely even speaks. How could that be narratively satisfying in any way? Miss Hound just had an episode where she declared that she's going to be better, that she's going to be good, and earned the friendship of the group of girls. It would be shit writing to toss that away so quickly, so scratch her off the list. Rooster Bold? Who cares, man? When was the last time this dude suited up for an episode? Plus, it just goes wildly against what his personality has been in the show so far. Capra Kid I could see being dominated by his parents into doing something for the Secret Council if they are indeed honoured as I suspect. Or at least, I could have seen that had they not have a whole episode where he overcomes their control and charts his own course, where he stands up for who he is as a person. To backtrack on that would be very damaging. Same with Minotaurox. He had a whole episode that talks about rejecting his dad's criminal past and his desire to make Ivan a criminal too. It would ruin that episode's ending to have this play out. Plus he, Mark, and Nathaniel kind of all fall into the who cares pile at the same time. Which leaves Bunnix, but we've seen the older versions and so it wouldn't make any sense. I reckon I've worked through the whole roster by now, and so what can we conclude? The same thing that I thought about coming into the video. A betrayal arc can work, but for almost every character it would regress them and feel forced. I just don't think the show needs a hero turning bad at this stage of the narrative anymore. I feel like it would be a flop story, and there are far more interesting ways to go about things with the whole Lila where's Wally thing that the fandom's been going on with. Looking at all these different characters in the background, trying to figure out which character is secretly her. There's no point in ruining a side hero now that we're finally developing them more. Storylines should offer substance over shock, and I think this would almost solely be for shock, and thus, I think would be bad. But of course, with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of a potential hero to villain story? Do you think it could work? Maybe not? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.